Hello everyone and welcome. The ninth episode of Magia Record anime is out, which means that of course it's once again time for the differences and spoiler video. So of course there will be spoilers for the North American and the Japanese version of the Magia Record game. If you don't want to hear any spoilers for the video game story, then don't watch this. Otherwise, let's go with what the game did at this point of the story. So starting off, remember we were maybe about 40% of our way through this chapter. So continuing with the chapter, the last thing that happened is that Iroha was talking to Aichan on her phone. Well, at that point we didn't know her name, but now we do know her name, because right after this Aichan does introduce herself. And they do talk a little bit, but Yachio, she's very hesitant to engage with Aichan, and she's still very wary about who this person is. Could it be an enemy? What is this? So they do talk a little bit, and the first thing they talk about is how does Aichan know who Iroha is? How did she know that she's a magical girl? And basically she mentions that she basically saw Iroha exchange numbers. This is something that happened way earlier, where she exchanged numbers with Felicia below the radio tower. And she somehow saw that exchanging of numbers, and she also heard them talk about magical girls and all that stuff. So it's a bit wishy-washy, basically sort of like hand-wave, like, yeah, I heard about it, basically like that. I like what the anime did a lot better. And then they keep talking a bit more, and Aichan does mention that she is in fact not a human, but she needs help from a magical girl. So they kind of start thinking, who could this be then if it's not a human? Could it be a witch? And we see a silhouette of a witch, but no, it's not a witch. She's an Uwasa. Oh no, she's a rumor. And the Uwasa mentions that Iroha should come and lead her, and as well as rescue the Sana, who's trapped in endless solitude, or as they call it, the radio wave realm. I like endless solitude a lot better. They then ask, how does that work? How do they even get to the radio wave realm? And the Uwasa, of course, tells them that they should jump off the radio tower, and that would get them there, which of course makes Yachio even more suspicious of what's going on here. So they want even more information. So Aichan does mention that there was a website involved in getting people to endless solitude, and they need to find that website to find more information for themselves to basically show that what Aichan is talking about is true. And basically, once again, we're at a point in the story where the writers sort of don't know what sort of logical way we can take to finish the story. So they sort of just flail their arms around like, oh no, what do we do? How do we find out where the website is? Oh wait, we have heard other people talk about the website. Felicia, you know about the website, right? And Felicia doesn't. So once again, we're flailing arms. Oh no, what do? We once again have nowhere to go. So at that point, Homura, by the way, Madoka and Homura are of course still part of this chapter in the game. Homura just mentions, yeah, look at the browser history. I mean, if you saw the website, it's probably in your browser history. And they do find the website. But once again, we are at a dead end because it needs a password. What? Just have the website be open. Why do we need to? This is I don't like that the video game story does this all the time, where it just randomly puts a roadblock in front of them, and it's like, oh, I didn't expect this roadblock. What do we do? And no one knows what to do, and then just randomly we'll find out what to do. Okay, so here's what happens. They wonder how are they gonna find this password, and then Momoko randomly calls them on the phone and tells them, hey, I know where you can find the password. Isn't that convenient? This is definitely good writing, guys. So they know where to find the password, which is it's written on a radio wave, on the radio tower itself, on one of the beams that holds up the radio wave. I want to keep saying radio wave tower, the radio tower. So they go over to the radio tower, and there they want to find where the password is written. But as it turns out, the Nays are currently at the tower, and they're trying to delete the password by like scrubbing it with some chemical to get rid of the password. Why didn't they do this earlier? I'm not quite sure. So they try to get rid of the password, but they get attacked by the heroes, and I don't want to call them heroes because they're bullying the Nays again. Haven't we bullied the Nays enough? But no, we need to be evil bullies again, so the Nays get smacked in the face and they run away crying, why are we such evil bad people? The Nays don't deserve this. So they find the password and they enter the password as the Nays ran away, and in this website they do find indeed more information about the rumor, and as it turns out this website is some sort of repository of information about mysteries, but they're not the same great mysteries as you can see in the Kamihama rumor files. They are shit mysteries basically. They're like the off-brand stuff basically. And Yachiro's like, my rumor file is the real high-brand stuff. This is the off-brand stuff, okay? So on this website, they do find an entry on this Radio Wave Girl rumor, or rather the Endless Solitude rumor, where it's actually not even called the Endless Solitude rumor. It has so many different names. It's called the Anonymous AI rumor as well. And they read the Anonymous AI rumor, and Uwasa, the Uwasa-san, is suddenly there. It's not there, it's like what the Uwasa-san usually would say is like on the website, so they read it out as if it was said by the Uwasa-san, and the Anonymous AI is basically the same thing that you see in the anime. It's like, oh no, we made an AI, it learned bad words, and because it learned bad words it became evil, and then we had to lock it away in some place, but oh no, it now wants people to talk to, so it captures people. Basically the same part in that way as well. So having found out all this information, they call Ai-chan again, and they realize that everything that Ai-chan's been saying is kind of true, and they do realize what's going on, and that they need to help Sana, who is trapped in this rumor labyrinth. And Madoka and Homura, they also want to help, because like I said, they're still part of this. You're going to keep seeing this, that I'm just like, oh yeah, while everything else is happening, Madoka and Homura are just randomly there, and they chime in and say, hi, we're still here. Just because it's Madoka and Homura, and people know Madoka and Homura, so they want to put them in the story. Yay. More on that later. So, even though they've already decided to help at this point, Yachio still is totally sus of what is going on here, and she wants even more information. So she asks proof that Sana is indeed trapped in the radio wave realm, as they call it, and in order to facilitate this evidence, Ai-chan then sends memory logs over the phone. I guess it's videos or something. So she sends videos over the phone to Iroha, and she looks at the phone and sees these memories, and the memories that we see are very similar to what we see in the anime at this point, with some major differences, but I'm going to go over the major differences later as well when I'm at the anime part. But the important part is that Sana is in the radio wave realm, where she comes to in like 32 days ago, I think it was, back at that time, where some other girl was trapped, but then that girl was able to leave and Sana entered, and she doesn't really panic. She kind of wanted this. She wanted to find a realm where she could find someone who could be her friend, so she kind of immediately tries to befriend the Uwasa, but the Uwasa doesn't really know how to deal with this, and more importantly, the Uwasa is actually pretty evil. Like, we don't actually see it doing evil stuff, but we can tell that the Uwasa is saying some bad stuff, because Sana wants Ai-chan to stop saying really bad stuff. Like, I think Ai-chan at some point says something like, the weak should be destroyed, or because they're inferior, stuff like that. But Sana sort of talks Ai-chan down repeatedly, and over time Ai-chan learns the value of compassion. That's basically the story of these memory logs, and Sana of course gives Ai-chan a name after a while. So towards the end of this, Sana then of course says that she doesn't want to leave, because she mentions she's not loved by her family, she doesn't really have anyone who likes her, she has no friends, no family, no one likes her, she has no place anywhere, but here is where she can be true, and here's where she can find her place. And she also mentioned something very important. She did make a wish that she would be invisible and disappear, but that was not her real wish. But she didn't really figure that out at that point. She only figured that out now, that her real wish was to be accepted by other people. But of course now she's already made the wish, so it's too late for that. there is also this really, I want to say, kind of heavy-handed attempt of trying to foreshadow the later parts where Ai-chan sort of goes, but hey, if there was someone who came here and sort of wanted to rescue you and someone needed you and told you that, wouldn't you be okay with that and then leave with them? Wink, wink. And Sana is like, oh yes, that would totally be amazing. Maybe I could be a good person and if someone came here and helped me, wink, wink. Subtlety? Someone writes subtlety with an X on the writing team. So, of course, the team, having seen those memory logs, they've already decided to help. They've now decided to help even more. So, Iroha relates to Sana in her plight, because Iroha tells everyone that, hey, I've also been lonely sometimes, so I definitely know what that's like. So she decides to jump off the tower and help Sana. Now, as they go up the radio wave tower and before they can initiate the jump, Iroha wants to jump, but Madoka and Homura, they also want to jump, because like I said, they're there and they want to help too, so they get ready to jump. And the rest of the team, they have to fight Wings of Magius, because as it turns out, they get warned by Ai-chan that Wings of Magius are about to arrive at the exit of the labyrinth, which is in Kamihama Central Tower. So, because the exit is full of wings, they decide to split up, so the rest of Team Mikazuki goes to Kamihama Central Tower and smites some wings, because that's something fun to do. Let's bully some more people. We are the bully guys. We are the bullies, guys. We bully the knees, we bully the wings. Why do we keep bullying people? We bully the rumors, the witches. They don't get to do anything. We're the bad guys. And the rest of the team, or rather the trio that is left, Iroha, Madoka, Homura, they jump off the tower and they enter the radio wave realm. What a name. In there, they want to look for Sana, but oh no, they get attacked by rumor minions that aren't even in the anime. But yeah, they get attacked by rumor minions for a little bit, and they wonder if this was a trap, but this is just a fake out, because just one scene later, we immediately meet Ai-chan, who tells the minions to not attack. Why didn't she tell them not to attack earlier, when she knows that people are arriving? And why did she wait for that after they arrived and almost get killed by minions? We don't know. Maybe it's because they want to have a fake out about it, maybe being a trap. With they, I mean the writers, of course. Or just the writer, I don't know how many. We actually don't know who is writing this. This is a very interesting part. We don't know who's writing this. So, maybe it's because they know that the story isn't very good, and that's why they want to hide the name of who wrote this. So after they've met Ai-chan, Sana is also there, and they of course get talking a bit, and Ai-chan says to Iroha that she wants her to take Sana out of this realm and into the real world, and Sana of course doesn't want to go away, and Ai-chan also mentions that it was Sana that taught her kindness, and now she wants to repay that kindness by letting Sana go back into the real world. And Iroha tries to relate to Sana by telling her, I know how that feels to be lonely. I don't think Iroha knows how Sana feels at all, because we don't actually get to see Sana's backstory in the main story, but I'm going to talk about that when we actually get to see it in the anime. So, as they try to talk it out, and Ai-chan says she wants to be deleted, they get interrupted randomly by a wild Alina that randomly appears. So yeah, the Jojolina is here, although in the game she's not that Jojo. And what she does is, because she comes in, she once again goes like, I don't want to be betrayed by some Wasa, so I'm angry now, and I'm gonna fight you. And she also has Wings of Magius with her, who... This is a weird bit. So she has Wings of Magius with her, and says, I'm gonna let you fight the Wings of Magius. And then like one scene later, they're gone. I don't actually think we see what happens to the Wings of Magius. They might be in-game when you like fight the actual enemies in gameplay. There might be some wings that you see right there, but in the actual story parts, they don't really show up anymore. Just later, way later, they say, oh, the wings, they're at the Kamihama Tower, right? So maybe they just sort of show up, say hi, and then disappear out of the labyrinth again. It's hard to say what's actually going on there without seeing what's going on, because we just have characters talking to each other in speech bubbles and we don't actually see anything. So that's a problem. So yeah, they of course want to fight, but before they fight, something interesting happens. Okay, something that doesn't happen in the anime, because we have plot points and entire story arcs that happen in the game that don't happen in the anime. So Alina says that she's angry, and because she had to deal with Ribbons. And who's Ribbons? Well, Mummy, of course. She had to deal with Mummy, and she mentions that she fed Mummy to some creation of hers. And at this point, everyone who's reading the story goes, "Oh, what happened to Mummy?" And Maruka and Homura, they're also there, because like I said, they're just there, and they go, "Oh, what happened to Mummy?" And Iroha is also like, "Oh, I don't care what happened to Mummy, because she tried to kill me last time, and it's probably a good thing that she's not trying to kill me anymore." Although, more on that later, because Mummy really does try to kill her later as well. She just can't help herself trying to kill Iroha. I think the only time where she doesn't try to kill Iroha is in the final chapter of the entire story. But until then, so this entire story arc gets hinted at that Alina did something terrible to Mummy, and then they actually fight. And similar to in the anime, old Dorothy appears, and if you don't know what old Dorothy is, it's Alina's doppel, which is when you turn into a witch. Why am I explaining? This is the story, this is the spoiler part. You already know what a doppel is. So Alina's doppel appears, although we don't actually see it in the story bits, we see it in-game, because you then get later like a scripted battle. In the scripted battle, Alina starts out turn 1 with her doppel, unless you one-shot her, like 99% of players did, because she doesn't have much HP in the normal mode. But yeah, so you get to see her doppel, which looks mostly the same, although there's one big difference. We're going to get to it once we actually get to the bits in the anime. So after they have fought it out, well, I say fought it out, I think Alina just sort of does her doppel attack, and after that she goes, "Oh, you're weak now. I've used my doppel, so now you are weak," meaning you can't fight the Uwasa anymore. Why do they have to fight the Uwasa? More on that in a bit. But she goes, "Oh, you can't fight the Uwasa anymore, so I'm just gonna leave now." She just leaves. She doesn't get defeated. She doesn't get made to retreat. There's nothing there. She just randomly decides, "I'm just gonna leave now because you guys are weak enough for maybe potential future fights to go bad. Bye. Arrivederci." And she just goes off. Good writing, definitely good writing to just have the bad guy randomly disappear. I hate this shit as well. Oh my god, guys, I'm just gonna talk about this. I don't have anything against Fate writing, because it services its setting well. For what Fate is trying to achieve, the writing of Fate is pretty alright, but there's this one scene where, like, Gilgamesh is about to kill... It's an Unlimited Blade words, where Gilgamesh is about to kill Shiro and Rin, and then he's just like, "Oh no, I might get myself dirty. I'm gonna run away now and kill you guys later." I don't even know why I brought up Fate, because it's like this is the example I always bring up in anime communities, because everyone in the anime community knows that fucking scene. But this happens all the time in fiction, that the bad guy has the good guy right there, and then he just randomly leaves, because why? So afterwards they have a conundrum that they are presented with. They can either leave the labyrinth, but on the exit of the labyrinth there's like apparently a few hundred feathers that are ready to fight them, and that would be bad. Or they could try and resolve the barrier by defeating the Uwasa, but there's a problem. So you see, they can't just leave the barrier, because in order to leave the barrier they would have to leave someone behind, because the rules of the rumor state that there always has to be one person in Endless Solitude in the radio wave realm, and if they all try to leave at once, that would go against the rumor and therefore sort of make Aichan evil. So they sort of talk to Aichan and they tell Aichan that they're going to leave. All of them are going to leave, and as Aichan hears that all of them are going to leave, she basically turns feral and attacks them, and she says, "I can't hold myself back, because if you go against the rumor, I'm forced to attack you because I'm programmed to." And so she basically attacks them, like whacks them, like punches them in the face, and then goes, "Sorry, I didn't mean to, but I have to." And at that point, they fight a little bit. Maruka and Iroha, they do a combination attack that weakens Aichan, and at that point, Homura stops time for Sana and tells Sana to attack Ai. I know a lot of people tell you that it's important that this happened like this because, of course, Homura also had to kill her best friend, mostly kill her best friend at some point. So it makes sense that it's Homura telling Sana to do the same. But she never said anything like this. She never said, I know what it's like to kill your best friend. She just said, it has to be you to defeat the rumor, which you can say sort of hints at that. But knowing the quality of the writing that is being portrayed in all of this main story stuff, I'm not sure you can give this writer that much credit. If you can say it hints at something or it tries to show something in a specific light because of either metaphors, symbolism, or references, if it was a different writer, I could see that being the case. But if the writer makes so many mistakes all the time and the overall writing is just shoddy, I'm not willing to give the writer this, and I'm just gonna say it's a coincidence. I'm just gonna say it's a coincidence that that Homura is there with Sana telling her this, because I don't trust this writer to make this reference on purpose. It's as simple as trust and faith in the writer. I don't trust this writer, I don't have faith in this writer, and therefore I don't want to believe that this is indeed a reference that is being made on purpose. So Sana then indeed delivers the killing blow. But even though she's delivered the killing blow, Ai-chan then continues to talk for a few minutes because, as we know, with good writing, wink wink, good writers, bleh, characters who are dead keep talking for a few minutes until they've said everything they want to say and then they die, instead of saying everything they want to say and then get killed. Like then have the mortal blow delivered, not mortal blow delivered and then say everything they want to say. In Metal Gear Solid 4, don't you like kill people by blowing them up in an explosion and then they still have like a minute-long conversation with you and you're wondering who is even having this conversation with you because they're blown to pieces? Same thing in Metal Gear Rising. They do this here as well. So Ai-chan, even though she's kind of dead, she keeps talking and she thanks Sana for having given her a name. And right before she disappears, Iroha asks one last time, do you know who Ui is? Because she asks this everyone she meets. But this time she actually gets a different answer. Ai-chan says, as an Uwasa, I know Ui. And then disappears. So you've waited for all this time to die just to say the cliffhanger thing. And before you can say the actual important part, that's when you disappear, because that's good. I'm sorry, I keep riffing on it, but the more I go into this, in this differences and spoilers videos, I've done 9 videos of these already, and the more I do these, the more I realize how many mistakes and shortcomings the writing really has in all of these places if you actually decide to look at it step by step. So after all of this, we're basically in a similar spot where we were in the anime, where the labyrinth disappears, they're outside again, and the rest of Team Mikasuki is there. This is now all playing on top of the Kamihama Central Tower, because in the game they already knew it was going to be on Kamihama Central Tower, so they all already went over there, and they all meet up again and greet each other. Hey, you're Sana, right? Yes, I'm Sana. You can see me? Wow. So at this point, right before I decided to end this recording, Alina is there and she has a witch that she wants to fight the team with. So there's more fighting. This chapter I think has 7 parts or 6 parts? 7 parts. I think this chapter has 7 parts to it. Like 7 individual sections of story that the story is divided into. We've been through 5. And this episode was 2 of these sections. So the first episode was 3 sections, I think, and this episode was 2 sections. There's still 2 sections left. So it's possible that the entire next episode is still dedicated to this chapter, and more importantly, the resolution of this chapter, because there's a whole bunch of fighting now. We've only just started the fighting. If you thought, man, that was they've had like a whole bunch of fighting against Alina in this episode. It wasn't that much, okay? It wasn't that much, but still, there was some incredible fighting going on in this episode, because the way it looked, I mean, it looked really cool, this fight, right? There's a whole bunch more fighting coming in the next episode, unless they go some other direction, because we don't know what they're doing. We really don't know what they're doing at all. But if we go with what the game does, there's a whole bunch more fighting coming next time. So much more fighting. But before I worry about all of that, let's actually go over to the anime. I've already wasted 20... This is the longest I've ever talked about the actual game part, even though this was the shortest game part to talk about in all of this. So in the anime, what happens? At the start of this, we see a repeat of the Invisible Girl rumor, which once again is anime original. This rumor does not exist in the game, therefore I can't really say anything about this other than completely anime original. Nice. It sort of ties more into Sana herself. Although it seemed like last episode they were going to tie Iroha more into this, because it seemed like they were trying to show that Iroha was turning into an invisible girl herself. And I thought what they're going to do is that Iroha is going to reason with Sana, similar to in the game, that they're alike, because Iroha manages to convince Sana to leave the radio wave realm by telling her that she's basically just like Sana and she knows what it's like, but she knows that it gets better and that she needs friends and all this stuff, the power of friendship. But this didn't happen in the game, in the anime. In the anime, they don't really talk much to each other at all, so maybe it's possible this happens next episode, but Sana has already decided to leave the realm. I guess maybe they still have to convince Sana to join Team Mikazuki, but where would she even need any convincing? She wants people to accept her for who she is, and she now has a whole bunch of magical girlfriends that would accept her for who she is, so why would you need another pep speech, a pep talk? I don't know. So after the opening has played, we then see that Ai-chan talks a bit about herself. I've already gone over this so many times. So yeah, she mentions this time though in the anime on how she found out about Iroha, that she has tracked the radio waves between electronic devices and found through all of this information that Iroha is indeed who she is and what she's doing, and that's how she has found out all this information, which makes all more sense for a technological and advanced artificial intelligence to do, other than I just heard it, I just overheard it, lol. So yeah, it makes sense that it's all tied a lot more into actual electronics. So of course he once again mentions Iroha for her to delete her, that she's the Uwasa of the endless solitude. She mentions that that in order for someone to enter, they have to jump off alone the radio tower. Interesting enough, here's another thing that has been added to this rumor in the anime. You have to jump off alone to enter. They make a specific point of this, that you can't have multiple people enter because only one person is supposed to enter at one time. Nothing like this is in the game. In the game, 1 billion people could enter at once if they wanted to. There's no restriction on that whatsoever, but in the anime it has to be just one person. Which is totally fine because Madoka and Homura aren't here anyway, so there's no problem with just being one person because we know it's gonna be Iroha anyway. So at this point then also we see the Uwasa-san sort of section about the rumor of the endless solitude, or the anonymous AI being told to us. Once again, it's very much the same as in the game of the Uwasa, of the AI that gets created but then turns evil and then does some evil stuff and learns bad words and then gets put away, but because it wants to keep talking to people, it traps people. Yay. Nothing much different there. So once again, I mentioned that she can't go against her programming as an Uwasa, and that she has to do what the Uwasa says. And so in order to free Sana, she has to get help by having the team, I say she for an AI, but yeah, it's kind of female anyway. So, and she says that she wants the team to delete her, erase her. And one thing that is very interesting is that, when I say interesting, it's actually quite obvious why. In the anime, they trust the rumor a lot more easily. They don't really keep demanding proof all the time. Like, we had an entire chapter, or not an entire section of the chapter in the game dedicated to just trying to figure out if we could trust her. But in here, they kind of just decide to trust her. I mean, she does have a lot of information that only someone who would be telling the truth could have, so that's probably why they trust her a lot more. But the more obvious reason why they trust her so easily is because we're not going to waste 15 minutes on them all the time trying to guess if this is really the truth or if this is a trap or whatever, because wasting so much time on this would really suck when we have so much more important stuff to get to. So it makes sense that they trust the rumor more easily so we can get to the good stuff a lot faster. So once they're on top of the tower to do all of this, Yacho mentions they might not be dying from false magical girl. I basically already told this in the non-spoiler review, but of course Yachiro does know about the truth of the soul gem, and therefore she knows that if you know about the truth, then you can kind of not die, because you can sort of heal your injuries if you have enough magic left, and you wouldn't turn into a witch from the shock, because if you knew the truth, you knew that you wouldn't die, and therefore you wouldn't have a shock, or at least not that much of a shock with it. Still would suck, because you'd expend like most of your magic for healing your entire body. Anyway, so Mokyu appears once again to signal to anime viewers that it's rumor time. Like, once again, in the game, Mokyu is just always there, and therefore Mokyu has pretty much no function whatsoever. While in the anime, Mokyu still actually has kind of an important function to show you that it is indeed about to be rumor time. So Iroha then indeed does jump, but before she jumps, Yachiro also mentions that Sana might actually be happy in Endless Solitude, setting up some foreshadowing for the future. So at this point we also get the memory playback. So the memory playback happened, of course, in the game as well, but in here it's, of course, a lot better because we get it visually, which is so much nicer. Although it's not really connected too much to the story now, because in the game, of course, they did say, Ai-chan did say that she's going to send over the memory files, so it was like they were watching a video, while in the anime, it just sort of happened, without any connection to what's going on, it just sort of happened. So the actual memory playback is a lot more in-depth in the anime, not just because we can see it visually, but also because in the game, they didn't really set up Sana's characters that much, because the writer could just refer to Sana's magical girl story, because every character in the game has their own side story, their own magical girl story that shows you the backstory of that character. And so, because the writer sort of thought people are gonna read the magical girl backstory anyway if they care about Sana, which, by the way, when this chapter was released, I don't think Sana was already playable, so I don't think anyone even had that backstory yet. Although she might have been released at the same time, I don't quite remember. So yeah, because of that, they didn't really go too much in depth in the game, but in here we're going a lot more in depth. Also because, like I said in a lot of other episodes, the game does want to focus more on making sure that you know as much as possible about the characters and how the characters interact with the rumors. Characters and character-to-rumor interactions are a lot more important in the anime, so there's a lot more focus going into this, and that's why this memory playback is a lot more in-depth. So what's going to happen in this memory playback is, of course, Ai-chan appears before Sana, who is newly entered the Endless Solitude, and Sana, of course, knows the rumor because she came here on purpose. Then the two of them, they play games. Of course, Sana, when she plays the chess game, she writes on cats because Sana really loves cats, which you also see in the opening and in some other places. Like, there's a lot of scenes where in the background or the foreground we see some cats because Sana really loves cats. Of course, then Sana gives Ai-chan her name. And an interesting bit is that Ai-chan also talks about her own backstory, that she has been abandoned as a failure because she learned the wrong stuff and she became too evil. Very important. Actually, I'm not quite sure how important this is, but in the game, we actually do see a bit that when Sana entered, Ai-chan was still saying some really bad, some evil stuff, and it was only through the time she spent with Sana that Ai-chan realized that maybe it's bad to be evil, and maybe it's bad to say bad words, and maybe you should be happy and sad and friendly. So she sort of learned friendliness from Sana, while in the anime, Ai-chan has pretty much always been friendly. So she didn't really learn that much from Sana. I mean, she still learned that it's better to be friendly and to watch out for other people. So she did learn compassion. But she was more neutral to begin with and went from neutral to good instead of going from evil to good. Not quite sure why. Maybe because I didn't want to have another character arc. I mean, it's a rumor, but you could call it a character. Maybe it's because they wanted to focus so much on Sana that they didn't want to have a secondary character arc running at the same time. So they decided to just have the one character arc, the one belonging to Sana, happen at this time. Although in the game it was just a handful of lines for the entire character arc. Not quite sure on this. So yeah, Ai-chan, of course, had started to capture people. and because it was lonely, and Sana also connects to this, that because Sana of course doesn't want to be lonely either. And Sana, of course, doesn't want to go home because now she doesn't have to be lonely, but she can just be in this realm, because outside of this realm, she's invisible, no one sees her, she has no place outside, although it is mentioned that magical girls could see her. I don't think this is specifically mentioned in the game, I'm not quite sure, might have missed that, but at least here they do mention specifically that magical girls can see Sana. Specifically mentioned. Actually, I don't think it was specifically mentioned in the game. It was, I think, in her side story that it was hinted at. But here it's specifically mentioned. Also, because of, like I said, it's a lot more visual what happens in the anime. We see so many different places that look really nice. The visuals absolutely top notch in this area, because in the game it was just speech bubbles, and the background in the game still looks really nice, but it's still just character cutouts with speech bubbles. While here, of course, we have all of these amazing vistas. Really like that. So then an additional part of the playback, because the memory playback we've seen so far is very similar to what it was in the game, but now we get an additional memory playback where we go back to Sana's backstory from before she went into Endless Solitude. So here we see, at first, the wish that she made, although the wish is more condensed, which makes sense, because in the game what happened is, at first, I'm going to talk more about Sana's backstory in a bit, but at first she wished to be taken to Animal Village, and Kyubei was, what? What even is Animal Village? And Sana then decided, forget that, I want to be invisible, I want to disappear. That's basically what happened there, but here in the anime they just show us the part where Sana wishes to disappear. By the way, if you look, I watched this episode 3 times, it took me a third viewing to realize this. If you look at the very left and the very right side of the border, there's stuff happening in the background, because the center part is similar with the Felicia backstory is 4x3, and the edges has other stuff in it. In this case, it's just some random background stuff with puppets or whatever. That's weird. Like I said, I didn't notice it until my third viewing. Maybe I'm just that dense. So what happened is, I'm just going to go over Sana's backstory. I'm not going to show the backstory for Sana on screen from the game, because it's pretty much what we see in the anime. So we see the family life where Sana had been taken into this other family by her mother, who left her father or whatever. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that her family shunned her, didn't want anything to do with her. What happened in the game specifically, with what they don't quite show, they sort of hint at it with Sana being crossed out and cut out of family photos, so it's visually hinted at what happened here. But in the game, her parents specifically and directly tell Sana, you are no longer part of the family, and that's that. They just tell her, you're no longer part of the family. I don't think they specifically make food for her. There's a whole bunch of other stories that happened, like during Christmas, where she wasn't allowed to have Christmas together with the rest of the family. She was just spending it in her room. Or during Valentine's, where I think she wrote a card for her parents or something, or she made a gift for her parents, and then the next day she found that gift in the trash, crumpled up, stuff like that, like the most horrible stuff you can imagine. That was all part of her backstory as well, where the family at some point just started ignoring her and told her that she was no longer part of the family, and she tried to find friends at school, but as we also see in the anime, she wasn't really effective at making friends at school either, mostly because people just ignored her. There was one character, it was a faceless NPC, who actually did get friendly with Sana, but when Sana got bullied more, that other character that Sana was supposedly friends with didn't stand up for Sana. So Sana just took that as, well, if my supposed friend isn't standing up for me, then fuck her. And she just sort of broke up that friendship at that point. And so she wasn't able to make friends as well at school. So what did Sana have left? In the game, there's another chapter to her backstory where she befriends an alley cat. And as we know, Sana really loves cats, because there's also this TV show that she really loves, Mr. Purrs a lot, which I think in Japanese is Goro Goro. So it's just some children's TV show about a cat living in Animal Village called Mr. Purrs a lot. And We actually see something like this in the anime, where we see the shot of her being in some sort of store, some sort of shop. It's actually called the Koneko no Goro Goro shop, so it is indeed the Mr. Persalot shop, where we see her with some plushies, probably plushies of Mr. Persalot, and she does talk about her loneliness. We don't get to see the entire part of this backstory, because what happened is she warms up to this cat that she finds in an alleyway. I think it was an alleyway, so she finds this cat and she visits it pretty much every single day, and it's like, well, at least I have this cat. I hope no writer will be so cruel as to take this cat away from me. So the writer takes the cat away, and some other guy comes in and tells Sana that the cat is gone forever. The writers really hate Sana, and they just throw the worst stuff you can imagine at Sana. So yeah, she made friends with the cat, and the cat probably fucking died. And that's the point when Sana wants to make the wish. So at that point, Sana wants to make the wish, and the first thing she thinks about is, take me to Animal Village, to where Mr. Persalot is. So, of course, Animal Village sadly doesn't actually exist. Just kidding, it does exist, but not for you guys. I'm gonna go over to it after I've made this video. So, of course, Animal Village is just in a TV show, and of course, Kyubey might know about the TV show, but he's not about to send a girl into a TV show. That's for other anime. That's for isekai anime. This is not about to become an isekai anime. So instead, Sana then wishes to become. To disappear, basically, to become invisible. And what we then see, an additional part that I don't think we see in the game specifically, is how she learned about the rumor of endless solitude, and then she decides to jump off the tower and enters the rumor labyrinth. So after all this stuff has gone on, we then see back in the real time and present, Iroha enters the labyrinth. They talk a bit about it. Ai takes a smaller form, and she now looks very different from what she does in-game. She looks more humanoid, like even more humanoid, less glitchy, and more well-defined, even though she doesn't really have facial features. What I took out of this is that this is supposed to be symbolic. Like I said earlier with the writing in the game, if something in the game is supposed to be symbolic or metaphoric or a reference to something, I don't trust the writer to have done that on purpose. While here in the anime, I do trust the writer, or more specifically, I do trust Inukuri to do that on purpose, because Inukuri does it all the time. They do it all the time. They reference something or have some sort of symbolism or metaphor. They love that shit. So I think the reason why we see Ai-chan take this sort of form here is because I think Ai-chan is supposed to be symbolic for Sana's mother that she never had, which is gonna make what happens later a lot more sad. So yeah, Ai-chan basically takes the form of Sana's mother, and I don't mean her biological mother, her supposed mother that she never had. And they do try to talk it out a bit. Sana is very scared. She's afraid. She doesn't want to leave. She's not quite as likely to talk to Iroha as she was in the game. Where in the games they did talk a little bit more about it, and like I said, Iroha was able to connect with her by sort of trying to relate to her, while in the anime, this sort of trying to relate these two characters together doesn't really happen. So instead, as Sana really doesn't want to leave, I says something about not wanting to go, about wanting to go against the Magius because the Magius are evil. She doesn't want to help the Magius. And at that point, then Alina appears, who's a lot more JoJo-like in the anime. But right before she appears, we see some sliding doors open, and these sliding doors actually have a symbol of Magius on them, interesting enough. So yeah, we see Alina appear, and she's really crazy and fabulous, and I love it. And I'm gonna talk more about Alina later, because there's some divisive stuff going on with Alina. There's some stuff right there, but I'm gonna talk about it later at the end of all of this. But for now, Alina does appear. She doesn't like being betrayed, and what she kind of wants to do, it's not quite that clear. It wasn't quite that clear in the anime, in the game either. But I think what she tries to do in the what she wants to do in the anime is, she kind of mentions that she wants to understand how it's possible that a rumor turned out this way. So we see her doing these drawing these green boxes around, these green squares around Aichan, and then sort of squishing it. And we know that Alina's personal magic is the creation of barriers and pocket dimensions. Yeah, Alina can create pocket dimensions, and she often uses that to trap people, to trap witches as well. So you know that cube that the Nays used in an earlier episode to summon a barrier? That's part of Alina's magic. She can just create pocket dimensions at will. And I assume what she was trying to do is she wanted to trap Aichan in such a pocket dimension and reprogram her with paint. This is also the point where, interesting enough, Alina's doppel Old Dorothy appears, although it's other than in the game. You know, Old Dorothy is not actually this mountain of paint, even though Alina thinks it's the mountain of paint. Instead, the actual Old Dorothy is this thing that comes out of her back that mimics her action. She just poses. But we don't see this in the anime. We don't see the actual form of Old Dorothy appear. I don't know why. I really don't know why. Especially because Alina calls it a doppel. So I would assume that at this point, maybe the viewers are supposed to understand that this sort of special thing that the characters are doing, where instead of turning into witches, they summon their witch selves and then attack with it, that thing is the doppel. I thought that was supposed to be the reveal. Hey viewers, that's called a doppel. And here's Alina using her doppel. But that connection wasn't really there, and part of that is because we didn't really see the witch form, and we didn't see any sort of witch transformation that we saw, for example, with the Nays when they summoned Dumdi. So in here, it sort of just looks like that's her attack. It sort of looks like that's her attack, and she calls her own attack a doppel. I don't know why, it's just her attack, right? No, it's actually her witch form. We just didn't really get that connection that well at all in the anime. Maybe it's because they're going to explain it next episode, because because this chapter is not done. We're gonna get most of the next episode. I don't know. But yeah, so Old Dorothy appears. We didn't get that. We didn't get the actual part of her. Once again, a fight breaks out between them, and Alina, like I said, wants to kind of capture and reprogram Ai, although I'm not quite sure why it didn't work when she tried to capture Aichan. Maybe it doesn't quite work that well. We don't actually know exactly how it works in the game. It just sort of goes like, oh no, Alina just created a pocket dimension, and that's basically all we get from it. We don't actually know how exactly it works, so we don't know. So at this point, then Iroha fights Alina, and more importantly, Aichan also fights Alina, which didn't happen in the game. Although what Aichan does is she attacks similarly to how she does in the game, where she attacks with error messages and blue screens. Yes, those are actually part of her attacks. Having error messages and blue screens appear, that's part of her attacks. But she also has something that she doesn't have in the game, which looks a lot cooler, which is the eye beam, where she like projects electricity from her eyes. Or it's not like it's not the eye beam, but the AI beam. Get it? The eye. Okay, so she attacks Alina with that, but Alina attacks with her doppel at melee range. This is also really weird. Like, of course, what she's attacking with is her doppel, Old Dorothy, but her doppel is not herself. So it's some being that she would have, like a stand. It's some being that she summons, and then that being attacks. But here in the anime, she sort of like throws it out of her hands, as if it really was her attack. Even further, now anime-onlys think that is just her attack. No, she has like a Rubik's Cube. No, I'm serious. She has like a Rubik's Cube. It's totally green, and it floats. She has like a floating green Rubik's Cube, and she like shows green rays of energy out of that Rubik's Cube, and that's her actual weapon, and that's her actual attack. She doesn't actually do anything like this in the anime. She only attacks with her doppel, but because she didn't have a Rubik's Cube to attack with, and only attacked with Old Dorothy, but even more so attacked with Old Dorothy in melee range out of her hands, it now really seems like that's her attack. That's just her attack, right? That's how she fights. She's a melee character. She's actually not a melee character at all. She's a very much a ranged character. Well, I don't know. That's a bit weird. I'm not sure what's going on there. But yeah, Alina is indeed able to throw some paint onto Chan, while we randomly see some bladed pendulum swing around and try to hit Alina. And this is something that happens really quickly. It's like half a second where we see like a bladed pendulum swing by, so no one really knows what's going on. We just know that right afterwards we see Sana with a big shield. But of course Sana with a big shield had no connection with a swinging pendulum. No, that's actually her attack. Sana's shield is not actually what she attacks with. You might think it's like Mashu, right? From Fate. She just whacks people with her shield, right? I mean, she can do that, right? She can just walk up to people and whack her with her shield. But that's not really what she attacks with. What she really attacks with is she shoots medieval torture tools out of her shield. Because Sana is actually really fucked in the head. This is something that I'm going to talk a little bit about later as well, but put that thought on hold for now. So Sana protects Ai-chan, and Alina then tries to attack Sana once again by jumping into melee range and using Old Dorothy at melee range for some fucking reason. And then Alina gets banned with more error messages, of course, Magia Record error messages, the ones and onlys. Which, of course, is a lot better of a way to get rid of Aina instead of just being like, Aina just sort of walks away, dude. No, so in here she actually gets forcefully ejected from the internet. Like a temp ban for like an hour or something. So afterwards we then see that Ai-chan has been splotched by Alina's paint. No, don't. What are you thinking about, guys? And we learn that this paint that comes off Old Dorothy is something very special in that it sort of messes with whatever it comes into contact to, more specifically witches and rumors. So anime onlys, of course, won't really have quite made this connection, but like I said in the earlier episodes, we have seen all of these minions and witches that specifically were under the controls of the Nays had paint splotches on them. And these are exactly the same paint splotches that we see coming from Old Dorothy. So if somehow an anime only were able to pick up on that, that would be your anime only connection, that it is indeed Alina and her double Old Dorothy able to control witches, and to some degree, as we see, Uasa as well, but for the most part witches. So because Ai-chan is about to go rogue because of the paint, she wants Sana to destroy her, and she sort of tells Sana that she's the only one who can do it, even though Iroha is right there. And you might be thinking, why can't it be Iroha that destroys Ai-chan? But don't worry about that, because the writer realized this as well, and so Iroha gets locked behind some crystals. Very convenient. The anime isn't perfect, of course. So at this point the emotional climax, of course, happens, where Sana has to erase Ai-chan, where Ai-chan transforms into Sana herself. I made a joke about this being like, oh, it's metaphorical for her killing her past self so she can move on, because it's a sign of character development to kill yourself, or like something that looks like yourself. Of course, just killing yourself is not character development, but no, something that looks like yourself, sort of whacking it is like symbolism for getting rid of your old self and forging a new self. But I do think there is I made a meme out of this in the review, but I do think there is some sort of truth to this being a symbolism that is at play here. Although you can also say that all of this time that Ai-chan has spent with Sana has made Ai-chan become more and more like Sana, because earlier we see Ai-chan turn into what I said was probably a stand-in for what's supposed to be Sana's mother, but you could also say that it's just Ai-chan's step to becoming closer to Sana. So yeah, so at the end then Sana erases Ai-chan, as Ai-chan says that she'll always be with Sana, making a lot of this a lot more emotional. And then the credits happen with the post-credit scene being a hint of continuation, because we're going to Kamihama Central Tower, where the exit of this barrier is, of this labyrinth is. And like I said, there's still 2 more of its 7 sections left for chapter 5, so there's a whole bunch of more fighting happening. Just fighting, there's not really that much story stuff happening now, but it's so much fighting. Anyway, now let's bring everything to a close and talk about all of the stuff that has been happening in this episode. So the game has put a lot more effort into connecting Sana and Iroha as characters that are alike. And it seemed to me like in the anime that they were going even more so in that direction, when in the episode before this, they kind of brought in this new rumor of the Invisible Girl and then showed how Iroha was slowly falling into this Invisible Girl spot herself. But then in this episode, we see that they didn't actually follow through on that, and Iroha and Sana basically don't do anything, even though Iroha is Sana's most popular ship, because Sana gets very clingy for Iroha after this, which doesn't really seem to be a thing in the anime, at least so far. Maybe they've just moved it to later because this episode was already full to the brim, so they just moved it to next episode. We're just gonna have to wait until then to see out about that. But what the anime did is, because we don't have the magical girl story for Sana, of course, specifically as like a side story, we have her entire backstory put into this episode, as well as an extended view of her memories, just to make sure that you really get a more fleshed out view of Sana as a character. You get a lot more invested in her, and make it a lot more emotional than what it was in the game, because in the game, with how the writing is, it feels a lot more ham-fisted and heavy-handed, while in the anime it actually was quite nice. So one thing also talked about earlier is that I in the game started out evil and then became good, while in the anime she sort of started out neutral and then became even gooder, which I'm not quite sure what to say of this change, other than it is a change that is quite apparent and it happened. More importantly, though, than all of this, all the Madoka and Homura parts have been cut out. And while Homura is my favorite fictional character of all time, and I absolutely love her, I'm glad that she and Madoka are not in this, because they just don't belong here. It's as simple as that. We saw in the game that they didn't really do anything other than stand around, waving their arms, "I'm still here, guys," and then maybe doing 1 or 2 attacks in a fight. That's all they ever did. And we then had this connection with Holy Mummy, which only once again served to just bring more of the Puella Magi Holy Quintet into this, even though this is not their story at all. But also, on top of that, on top of Madoka and Homura not being in here, of course, the whole Holy Mummy plot that was actually rather important in the game seems to not be in here. It might still happen in some capacity, but all hints to it so far have been dropped. So we might not get Holy Mummy's side story at all. Mummy might not become a brainwashed slave in the anime. We need to see that, what's gonna happen that. And instead of having all this Madoka Homura stuff, instead we now have this extended Sana side story. So if you could choose between throwing Madoka and Homura in there just to stand in the background and wave at the camera every 5 minutes, or choose between that or the backstory of Sana, I'd rather have the backstory of Sana, right? Because this is Sana's story. Why would you randomly have Madoka and Homura thrown in there just because, oh, I know these characters, right? This is not their story. This is a spin-off. This is not a sequel or a prequel to Madoka Magica. It's a spin-off. Like, don't get me wrong, guys. I love the original Madoka Magica a lot more than Magia Record, okay? Magia Record is not nearly as good as the original Madoka anime or Rebellion story. But why would I just sit here and tell you guys it's not as good as the original and then just slam the anime and move away? Can't we just look at the anime for what it is instead of looking for what it could not be? Because it could never be Madoka Magica, let's be real, guys. Even if the original Magia Quartet worked on this with the exact same team as worked on the original Madoka Magica anime, it wouldn't nearly be as good as the original anime, probably. So let's just, instead of trying to dwell on that, instead let's just look at what it is, okay? We can just not be idiots, not be bigots, and just look at what it is. And what it is pretty good. Not perfect, it does have problems, but it is still pretty good. Now let's look at some other stuff. I did mention Sana. I'm gonna save the Alina stuff for later, for last, of course. So the Sana stuff that I mentioned is, in the game, there are some very few hints about this. I'm gonna mention right away that I'm not gonna try to say that Sana has a personality disorder, but because I don't like doing this, I'm a really big enemy of people trying to diagnose fictional characters with mental illnesses, because there's a whole bunch of problems that occur when you do that. I'm going to save that for when I do a video on Sana proper, but I'm going to very quickly say this. There were some hints, very few hints in the game that Sana might have a personality disorder, mostly because even though she's really shy all the time and really introverted and doesn't really talk too much and has trouble socializing with people, there are some very few moments where she has sudden outbursts of really brutal rage. I don't mean brutal as in she physically does something, but she suddenly says something fucked up. Like, for example, there's this home screen line where Sana randomly says, "I'm going to rip your teeth out." Stuff like that. Like, she randomly has some completely over-the-top brutal lines that she just randomly blurts out when she gets angry. And more so on top of that, she loves medieval torture. She has it as a hobby. Maybe not doing medieval torture, but she reads about medieval torture. She attacks with medieval torture tools, and we know that Magical Girl's attacks are based on what they personally want to attack with. Sayaka attacks with swords because she wants to attack with swords. Homoda has a shield because it's not just what you like or what you want, but also it's in combination with your wish. It's a combination of the both. So for Homoda, she wanted to protect, because she wanted to protect something, she got a shield and the ability to stop time in order to defeat the enemies that stood in her way. So that's what she got. Kyoko had a spear with the interlinked chains because she likes being flexible, and she just likes spears, I guess. So basically that's what the case is with Magical Girl weapons, is that it is dependent on both their wish as well as just who that character is and what they want to do. And Sana's main attack is torturing her enemies with things like bladed pendulums that swing from the ceiling. That's pretty fucked up if you ask me. And the biggest hint on all of this is that Sana is the only character in the entire game who has two doppel forms. We know that a doppel is basically a witch, in that a doppel is basically the innermost dark and sinister emotions of a character being brought forth and manifested physically. And Sana has two of these forms. One of these protects, the other one brutally slaughters. Because of this, by the way, I'm going to get to a point before I bring all of this up right here, but and this is why I think there are some hints that Sana might have a personality disorder. The reason why I bring all of this up is the biggest hint towards all of this is the doppel, because being the only character with two doppel forms is a pretty big fucking hint. And the reason I brought this up is the doppel is designed and conceptualized by Inukuri, who is now directing Magia Record. So when I originally heard all this information, I thought, since Inukuri conceptualized all of this, it's highly likely that in the anime, Inukuri, now that they have the reins, they're going to lean heavily into this. Maybe they are going to have Sana say some fucked up shit during this fight. Maybe they are going to show some something that goes in that direction. Because like I said, it was Inukuri's that had conceptualized this idea of a character having two doppels. So I thought that this was indeed what they wanted to do with Sana, and they were going to follow through with that now. But it seemed like they didn't. Probably because they realized that it created a whole bunch of other problems if they followed through with that, and they just wanted to have Sana stay the shy young girl that she is. That's totally fine as well. Like I said, I just want to bring it up because I thought, in my opinion, it was a pretty interesting piece of trivia that at least this was a possible direction that Inukuri could have taken Sana, but they didn't. Okay, now for Alina. So Alina is just as crazy in her first appearance as she was in the game, over the top, jojoing all over the place. So the thing about why this is sort of problematic to some degree is there are basically two versions of Alina. So in the game, you have the main story and you have the side stories, which are event stories, Magical Girl stories, all of that sort of stuff. And in the main story, Alina is a psychopathic murderer and an evil villain. some people say that Aina is the most evil character in the main story and the actual villain. I disagree with that, mostly because Aina is the character who goes along with and enjoys doing evil stuff, but the character ordering people to do bad stuff and the character who orders Alina to kill is Toka. So in my opinion, Toka is more evil because she's the one ordering Alina to kill people, while Alina just goes, "Oh, killing! I love killing. Let me do that." So, in my opinion, Toka is most evil. Some people might disagree. This is like also a sort of moral conundrum? Is the person ordering violence more evil than the person carrying out the violence? That's up for debate. I just want to very quickly throw that in. But yeah, in main story, Aina is a psychopathic murderer, basically, who's completely over the top, and a lot of people love her for that, but even more people hate her for that, because she seems so one-dimensional. She seems so one-dimensional in main story. She just wants to kill people, and she loves killing people, and she gets off probably on killing people, and wants to make art out of everything and everyone. So why is this a problem now, and why have I brought up the second side of Aina? So in the side stories, Aina almost seems like a completely different person. In her Magical Girl story, and she has two Magical Girl stories because she has a regular version and her Holy Aina version. So there's like two Magical Girl stories where she's in the Halloween event where she has a prominent role. She is a prominent role in Karin's side story because she's basically Karin's shipping partner. They're a really good pair, by the way. And the thing is, a lot of people who mostly just focus on main story Alina and hate her for what she does in main story often overlook what she does in side stories. Because like I said, there's basically two Alinas. If you say you hate Alina because she's so evil, I basically say, okay, you're right. You're hating main story Alina, but you're not hating side story Alina, are you? Because side story Alina is not that. In the side stories, Alina is more like a troubled and confused youth who is unable to socialize correctly, who is unable to communicate directly with other people. She has some sort of sociopathic tendencies, that is true, some sort of psychopathic tendencies, but it seems to me like Alina by herself is not really evil, and she doesn't want to murder people. This is the weird part. So in her side stories, it is shown that Alina loves art. She's an artist. But she has trouble figuring out what she wants to do art about. She has spent her first 14 years of her life just making art about what she felt like was right, which for the most part included making art out of dead stuff, like cadavers, bones. But the thing is, a lot of these art pieces also had a sense of rebirth in it. Not just, I'm going to make art about death, but I'm going to make art about death and life, and the contrast between the two of them. So she was someone who was torn between these two extremes, and she didn't really quite know where she wanted to take her art. So she got into this identity crisis where she really tried to figure out, what am I doing art for? What is my art actually trying to say? What is the message that I'm trying to convey? And because, as you would expect with many artists, she's really quite an artist in that she's completely fucked in the head, and because of that she has trouble talking to people. She has trouble communicating her feelings, her emotions, her ideas with other people. She just does what she wants, and oftentimes that ends up hurting herself, both mentally and physically. So you can see that there's a lot of trouble that Aina has in her daily life, in her life in general. But at least when she's together with Karin, Karin is someone who is a very optimistic person, a very happy person, someone who engages with Alina even though Alina is so abrasive all the time, and someone who encourages Alina to try and do the right thing, but also Karin is someone who gives Alina a sense of humanity. Karin humanizes Alina, and Alina has gets many points in time where she is able to help Karin selflessly. Alina does a lot of selfless actions towards Karin. For example, she agrees to design costumes for Karin and her friends for no recompense whatsoever. She just decides to design costumes for Karin and her friends. She just does that What? I thought she was evil. Why is she suddenly selflessly helping people? What is going on here? So she also looks out for Karin also on a sort of mental side, on a moral side, because during Halloween side story, Karin was trying to plan this Halloween theater play, but Karin sort of was overwhelmed and let all her friends do the organization, while Karin sort of just was unable to actually help in the organization, even though she was supposed to be the director. And so Alina sort of gave Karin a pretty harsh talk that this is supposed to be Karin's theater, so she should take command. She should be the one to help her friends. Which, once again, it's not. No one else was willing to give her this information, because only someone who was willing to give her this information in a really harsh and personal manner would have been able to help Karin. So you see, in side stories, Alina she's still really crazy, but she comes more off as someone who's just confused and troubled and has trouble communicating. She has trouble communicating with people about what she feels, about her emotions, about everything. But in main stories, she just wants to kill people. Do you see the problem that I have here? Do you see the problem that Alina in general has in Magia Record? You have all this character depth and complexity that you see in side stories, where she can say some really harsh stuff, some really fucked up stuff at Karin, but that actually has a genuine friendly core message to it. Like, so you might say to Karin that she should rip up her own manga that Karin just drew, which is really, really harsh. But the reason she says this is because she knows that that manga is supposed to be a reflection of Karin, and she believes that Karin is going down the wrong path. So she tells her, rip up this manga because you're going on the wrong path. I know you're in this manga, basically. So you see, it's some really harsh, fucked up stuff, but it does have a really important, selfless message to it. But in main stories, you just want to kill people. It's so hard to actually talk. I'm going to make an entire video about Aina at some point, probably. But it's so hard to actually put all this into perspective. And the big idea was, don't worry, guys. The writing in the game is all over the place. People don't know what the fuck is going on. But Inu Curry is going to fix it. Inu Curry is going to make sure that all of this depth, all of this complexity, all of this nuance and subtlety that Aina, that Aina has to her from her side story, it's going to be here. Inu Curry is going to do Alina justice. But in this episode, she kind of just seems like the psychopathic murderer with no depth to her. That's a big yikes. That's a big oof. I just hope that we're going to see Alina's depth and complexity in some later parts, and this has no impact on that whatsoever. Let's just hope that Alina does get that complexity back at some point. So yeah, that's basically all of that. That's why some people don't like what happened to Aina in that episode. Also because it seemed like they were going to resolve all of these problems without anything happening. I know in the game, Aina also just sort of stormed in while they were having an emotional moment. But in here it felt a bit more out of place, because it seemed like the anime did indeed have the possibility to actually create a sort of end to that conflict without having someone interrupt. But in the game, it sort of everything went into the sand pretty quickly, and they sort of needed something to get them out of it. But yeah, I'm not quite sure here. I'm worried about that, but overall, I really love this episode, mostly because of the visuals and because of how well it actually managed to bring Sana's side story back into this. So for visuals, for Sana's side story, for cutting Madoka Homura out of this, all of these points make me give this a really high rating. I'm not giving ratings, but I would give it a really high rating. So yeah, that's that. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you want to see more, remember to leave a subscribe, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment and a like. That's the way it's supposed to go. My branding is terrible. See you guys next time.